Very good evening. I'm glad that you could join us on this very nearly summer evening. I can tell you it's warm in here as well. I'm going to make it worth your while being in the house, because I'm delighted to welcome a fella that I think I used to interview over a period of several years, every other week, if not every week. He was always one of the best interviewees at Sheffield Wednesday. Also, he holds a Sheffield Wednesday club record for consecutive appearances. He's been round the block as a player, he's been round the block as a coach, as a scout, and now he's head of recruitment at Premier League Burnley. I'm delighted to welcome Martin Hodge to the studio. How are you? How are you keeping these days?
Okay, thanks, Alan. Yeah, I'm fine. Yeah.
Well, it's only a couple of weeks since I've seen you, because I see you at Hillsborough quite regularly.
Yeah, this season I've not been as much as I've liked to have done, but because of circumstances. But lately I have, and I've managed to see. I always pop my head in the press lounge anyway, because it's next door to the Quixel lounge. So I always pop my head in and try and catch Imre Varadi or Greg McPhee, or Greg Fee, should I say. Two former club mates. And
yeah. You pop your head round there, because there's usually pie and chips and a cup of tea, as well.
No, I've not spotted them yet.
You're mistiming it. You need to be getting there a bit earlier.
Do you think, looking at my shape and weight, that I've mistimed anything?
No, but I can tell you, as a player, you were among the fittest and one of the hardest working. And if anybody doesn't know, there will be some that don't know, because we're going back a few years here. But the beauty of chatting to you, Martin, tonight is we can go back, but we can also come to the present day, because you've got views on the Owls as they are now, the Blades, your recruitment job at Burnley. But we are going back quite a long way. But before even that, you started your career at Plymouth in 1977, and you finished your career at Plymouth. That's an unusual story for starters.
Yeah, it is. I mean, originally they had a big scouting network in the north, but Tony Waiters, who used to be at Liverpool, felt that he needed to, because Plymouth is so far away, and especially in those days, the motorway, the last section of motorway wasn't built. Oh. So he had to do a lot of scouting, and we used to do trial matches at Worcester. So the north played the south. Right. And in those days, you only were allowed to take, I think it was 8 apprentices. So we'd all come together periodically, and then they'd pick the best out of, and they'd keep going until they got down to 8. And Gary Megson was one. I grew, I was an apprentice with Gary. We moved to Sheffield Wednesday. Gary and I have followed each other's paths, really. So that's how, well I know Gary. Yeah,
future teammate. And that team bonded so well under Howard Wilkinson. You got promoted to the, well, I was going to say the Premier League, the first division as it was there. And more than that, more than established yourself. You were knocking on the door to Europe. It was...
Yeah, we were. I think that... I don't know how many times it will happen in football. There's a similar... there's a similarity with Burnley, because I didn't think Burnley last year were good enough to go up at times, and yet I looked at them and I went, wow, they're going to take some knocking off. And I think we were the same. There was no real household names, but we had a lot of journeymen, and I call them the dirty dozen, although there was more than that. But, you get these lads together who haven't really hit it off at other clubs, or for circumstances beyond, they change managers and become available. And Howard took them all on and moulded us into a team that won things.
Greater than the sum of the parts, you could say, couldn't you?
Oh, without doubt. I mean, you had Gary Megson, Gary Shelton, you had Mick Lyons, Peter Shirtliffe, Mark Smith. I go through them all. Imre Varadi, Guy Bannister, Lee Chapman. You had a host. It was a mixture of who's who, but under Howard's guidance, Peter Eustace, Mick Hennigan. It was unbelievable times. And I would say, if you look at Howard, you can see why he's done well in football, and you can see why he won the championship with Leeds, because he was so far ahead at that time. Now, whether that was because he was a school teacher and saw stuff from outside looking in, and then went in, but he was miles ahead. They were doing, certainly in this decade, we were doing things in the 80s that they were starting to do in the 2000s. So
that's how far ahead he was.
That's how far ahead he was. Your vitamins, your tablets, your stuff like that. And I see nowadays. I was in the office today and they were talking about vitamins, and I said, in 1983, 84, we were doing that.
Right.
And they look at you a bit, well, you know, no, but Howard was doing that.
Yeah,
you know?
I think he's much higher up the pantheon of Sheffield Wednesday managers than some people will give him credit for. I saw a newspaper poll quite recently which had Ron Atkinson up there as being the kind of the best manager in Sheffield's recent history. Now, without bias, I'm going to say Dave Bassett for what he did at Sheffield United. But I do think that Howard probably did a job that eclipsed even what Ron Atkinson did when he came in.
Yeah, I never played under Ron. I worked under Ron.
Yeah,
but I never played under him. But you know, his record at Man U, West Brom, Sheffield Wednesday, and Howard. But Howard won the championship with Leeds. Now that takes some doing. Well, it's now the Premier League.
Yes, yes.
He won that with Leeds, and he was the last English manager to do it. Now, I know circumstances have all changed, but I think you got to take your hat off to him. Probably he's not the most effervescent, but probably I remember going to a dinner. We had a get-together a couple of years ago, and I actually stood up and I said, he's the only person that makes me look happy. So,
I know where you're coming from then.
Yeah.
You're putting on your best smile tonight.
Yeah,
it's not always there.
Oh, no, it's...
You can moan with the best of them.
Yeah, well, not so much moan, but I'm pretty dour, and I'm not a Yorkshireman, I'm a Lancastrian, so I've picked it up, but I've been in the city since 1983.
Can I tell you, I have invited Howard to sit where you are now, and he skirted round me so far. And I've got the feeling, and this is not to his detriment, that he wouldn't actually be comfortable in this sort of, because we have fun and we have a joke and we relax in this environment on a Thursday. And I've always felt that he's had problems doing that publicly. I'm sure that privately he can. Publicly, I'm not so sure that he'd be very happy
privately, privately, he's good, he can be fun, and I've seen it. It's like the Neil Warnock. You see Neil Warnock on the side of the pitch, and you go, "Wow!" You see him, and I've been to do's with him. He's invited me down to Cornwall. Totally different man, funny man.
Yeah.
A really
Absolutely.
funny man that would have you in stitches. But inside that dressing room and on that touchline, you'd think somebody's turned the switch on and he's just a totally different character. Yeah. And people always said, Neil, this, Neil. I'll tell you, funny man.
Yeah, well, I know him.
And Howard, you know, Howard, he likes to get up and speak, but when he speaks very well. He's done, I've been to funerals where he spoke fantastically well. I've been to dinners where he spoke fantastically well, and not about himself, about other people, about you know, real people that he's liked. Yeah. You know, so
he's never worried about his media image unduly, which I think has been a bit of a shame. And I've got to be honest, from a journalist's point of view, I've worked with easier characters, but let's put that to one side because that doesn't matter. What he actually did as a football manager is right up there and full of admiration for him. You had the best times of your career, I think, at Sheffield Wednesday, but you also had the most major disappointment. We're talking about how you nearly went with England to the World Cup in '86 and how you should have gone. The full story is coming up from Martin Hodge. But before we move on to all of that, let's bring it right up to the present. You go to Hillsborough a lot. I think you're going to be there, watch Wednesday on Saturday at Barnsley, aren't you? Is that right?
No, I was due to, but I'm not now. I've changed. Changed tilt.
But you've seen them often enough to have an impression. And you said that Burnley weren't that impressive last year, maybe as impressive as they were the previous time they came up.
But no, I think in bits, Alan. I think that when I saw them, they ground out results. Probably saying they weren't as impressive is a little bit because I joined them in October and I never realised how good they were. No. From afar, I thought this is this nitty gritty, hard working. Well, there is that, but there's ability. Yeah. And the ability took them to the top of the league. And I know I worked there, but I think it was 27 games, I think 23 or 27 games unbeaten. Now that takes some doing in the Championship where top beats bottom. And you wonder about the results.
We're seeing that more this season than we did last year in a way.
So I'm probably downing them a bit, but what I really meant was there was a side there that had everything. Yeah. All built to do the Championship. Because it is I don't care what anybody ever tells me. You talk about the Premier, you talk about League One, League Two. the Championship's a tough league. Tough league.
Where does Sheffield Wednesday stand in it? We know they're 6th at the moment and it's very, very tight. Are you putting them in the playoffs at the end of the season? What are your impressions?
Put my fan head on. I would say slightly disappointed of late.
Yeah.
Put me other head on, which would be from purely looking at the games. Again, I would say they'd be disappointed on collectively as a group that they've not put games to bed. I think they've had chances to put games to bed and haven't. I saw them against Blackburn when I thought they should have got something. I've seen them recently when I'm thinking, you know, one of those needs to go in, because if they don't, it's. I always get the feeling though that Sheffield Wednesday will score. That, you know, I sat next to somebody last week and I said, Sheffield Wednesday have a habit of scoring late. And they had a period where they were scoring late goals.
Early season, 2 or 3
matches. And I said that the one thing is that they never get, but they've got quality. When you look at the quality that's there, there's a squad that's got quality. At the moment, it's a little bit up and down, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's, you know, there's no consistency at the moment, which is a surprise to me, because this time last year, they were almost in the same position in the league, looking for the playoff. Got the playoff, and I'd have thought that really they know what it's about, but for some reason I don't know how. You know,
you would have thought the quality is there, and the depth. You would have thought,
without doubt. I mean, I look at Barry Bannon and I go, wow, you know, you give him 5 yards and he will hurt you all day long, and he can spray it, he can run with it, you know, and you look at the forward line, bringing Rhodes in, you know, who's a prolific goal scorer. You've got Fletcher, you know. Yeah. You've got a group of people. You've got Winnell, you know.
Forestieri.
Yeah, Forestieri.
Hopefully coming back.
Yeah. So there's a dearth of talent there, and it's a deep squad, and it's a quality squad, but it isn't firing.
It's not creating as much in the way of openings for the likes of Rhodes as maybe it should be. I think that's what they'll be working on. Yeah. Is that the way you see it or not?
No, I've seen them work. I'm thinking, score now because they've been on top. And I just think they've been a whisker away. I think the other week I saw them hit the post and I'm thinking, just go in. Because if it goes in, I think the place lifts. For anybody that doesn't know, and I was describing this the other day to somebody, I was describing it to a Liverpool boy. I said, nobody knows what it feels like to play for a Sheffield Wednesday. You could put Leeds in that bracket where it is noisy.
Absolutely.
And when I played in my time there, wow, they say the 12th man. They were more than that. They were the best ever. And I only need to look at them, and I'm quite proud. The fact is that when I say to people, I'm from Sheffield, I go, and they'll go, cool, they're fans. Away from home, they take thousands. You know, Preston, they fill the whole end, and not many teams do it, you know. But it's a great place to play, but you've got to be thick-skinned, because when the chips are down, you also get a little bit stick. But I don't mind that. And that's probably why I stayed in Yorkshire, Al.
You had your moments. There was one in particular. We'll come on to that.
Cheers, Al.
Part 2. You may not stay for part 2.
No.
I mean, it's terrible when you were such a fantastic keeper and people come back to one incident in particular. However, we can make a bit of humour about that later, because you know.
I don't know whether you found it funny.
I don't know whether time heals. And I'm going to read out some Twitter comments. You've had a fantastic. I know you're not into Twitter and social media, but it has its uses, and I've had some great comments from people. I'll read those out on the show. But the job at Burnley, head of recruitment, that sounds a big job. You're doing it now for over a year, haven't you?
Yeah, I got a call from Sean Dyche, and he said, I'd like the board to interview you for a position at the club. I thought I was going as match analyst, which I'd been for the last 12 years with Cardiff, Watford, and in the last 8 years with Wales. And I thought I was going as that, and he said no. He said it's the recruitment. He said I want you to come in as head of recruitment, working on the Frank McParland. The same week I joined, Frank disappeared to Rangers. So I was still going to be head of recruitment, but I had a sporting director above me. Well, I haven't got a sporting director above me now. I've got, I'm the one that organises everything and does everything. Wow. And I have about, well, yeah, I think about 13 people below me that, say below me, that's a wrong term, that work within the department, whether they be part-time or full-time, and organise all the games for them.
You decide where they go?
Yeah, decide where they go, yeah. So I'll say take in that game and go and watch him, but if anything else catches your eye, I want to report on him. We identify players, but I also leave it to the freedom of the scout to go, well, I fancy him, because everybody's opinion counts, not just my opinion. No. Now, I'm the one that probably sit down with the manager and the coaching staff, and we talk about players, and we've got reports on every single player. We've got over 4,000 reports on our system. Yeah. And what you do is you go, well, yeah, they're the reports, gaffer. He'll say, well, that wasn't good. But that's where it is, because football isn't, it's not always a good day. And you've said, we'll talk about, you know, it isn't. It's not always a good day. You can have, I can go and watch somebody 3 or 4 times, and he might have 2 good ones, 2 bad ones. I might see him half a dozen times. He had 4 or 5 consistent and 1 not. You know, so
you were instrumental in bringing Robbie Brady. You watched Jeff Hendrick are among players that. You know, and really it's like grains of sand. There's only a couple of grains of sand of all those players that are actually getting through to the signing stage.
Yeah, strange thing
Sean
is,
Dyche take over at that point?
Sean trusts you. He's fantastic at trust. He's an excellent manager, and I mean an excellent manager. He gets it right with his players, both on and off the pitch. He's not one to be up, down or indifferent. If we win, lose or draw, he's straight. You wouldn't know what result you'd had as a football team when he's doing his interview.
Absolutely.
Post-match.
Second that.
You know, so he keeps it grounded. He's got great staff, really good staff, and he's got an honest bunch of players, and he demands that your honesty, desire, commitment are your DNA. And that's similar to Howard.
Yes.
Similar to Chris Wilder. I have nothing but admiration for Chris Wilder. Yeah. Nothing. Because that place, I mean, Sheffield United across the road is a big place to play as well. Yes. Because they'll get 24, 27,000. Yeah. And they've seen some really bad times. But once they employed Chris Wilder, I knew in my mind that they would get promoted. Because he's no nonsense. Does what it says on the tin. Surrounds himself with good people. Paul Mitchell, chief scout. You know, Nearly, you know, been around the block, been managed, and Chris is, you know, there'll be no holds barred, and this is how we do it, and we run through the brick wall. And I've heard his interviews, and he's right, because that's how Chris was as a player. There's something to be said for a DNA, because it gets you a long way.
Lots of managers preach that, but not so many carry it through as forcefully as maybe Howard did.
I think you've got to get the players. You've got to know the players you're bringing in.
So it's the character of the players that's so important.
The problem you have is when you change from that aggressive, dominant, hard-working, committed to a more technical side, and more. We want to be a bit more flamboyant. Well, that's when the mixture's got to be right. Yeah, we can be flamboyant, but we also need the grit, determination, desire, commitment.
And will the 2 parts get on with each other because of personalities?
Exactly, and that's why it's very hard at times to get the mix right. I think we've got it right. I think Chris has proved he's got it right.
But the higher you go, the harder it is to get it right.
Yeah, because people.
Look at Sheffield Wednesday. We've got some big personalities.
Yeah, but you look at the Premier League now, and we play Spurs on Saturday, and I looked at the team this afternoon, and I've gone, oh wow.
I'm going to say, oh wow, because that's part 1 completed. Would you believe? In part 2, we're going to ask you about Kieran Westwood, Joe Wildsmith, etc. They have a view on those. Martin will tell us about that extraordinary and shattering reverse for him in 1986 when he didn't go to the World Cup with England. Loads and loads more. And your Twitter questions. Some of them are quite amusing, I'll tell you. I'm not even going to show you before. See you in 5 minutes.